Welcome, everyone. So we finally got it set up and working. So I'm here to talk about navigators, routes, and transitions. Hands up here. First of all, who has used Flutter? That's what I want to see. You're in the right place then. How about who has had problems with navigators, routes, or transitions? Okay, so you're definitely in the right place then. That's good. So a little bit about me. I'm self-proclaimed Flutter community lead. There's a few of us around. And I'm also CTO at Dev Angels London. We're a small team that just make Flutter mobile apps now, which is a win-win for me. I'm also co-organizer of the Flutter London meetup with George Medvey, who is around somewhere. Maybe not. He's here, I swear. And I'm also the co-founder of the Flutter study group on Slack, and I've been coding mobile now for about 11 years, mainly Android, and the last 2 years in Flutter. So we're going to cover these topics in order, kind of just covered that, whoops. So first of all, Navigator. What is Navigator? Navigator itself is a management class. It's not actually a widget itself. Not in the sense that you kind of expect. It wraps two other main widgets, and that is overlay, and overlay wraps a stack. So if you wanted to implement your own navigator, you totally could. Just grab yourself a stack and manage all that stuff for you. You'd be pretty masochistic to try that. It's not simple. The key point here is that with some simple commands on Navigator, it will control an overlay. We can have a look at overlay later in more detail if people want. And it also manages the history of that stack. And internally, it's just a list. Sadly, we do not have access to that list at this moment, which I'm sure everyone wants. More on that later. So where does the actual Navigator come into play when building an app? So first of all, every app that probably everyone in this room has actually tried making contains either a Material app or Cupertino app. Internally, that creates the Navigator widget via another internal widget called Widgets app. Really confusing, but it's. But the main point here is the parameters that you supply create an on-generate route, and this function is the basis for all navigation, and we'll get to that. Also, just a side note, anytime I mention Material, I'm also interchangeably using that with Cupertino, so both apply in both places. And it's also one of these very weird widgets, Navigator, where you don't supply a child widget. It just accepts that one function, on generate route. However, if you do return null, it's the one thing you must implement, which is on generate route. But if you do return null from that function, no route is available for the settings supplied, then you'll need to implement on unknown route. Side note, but it's good to know. So this is straight out of the documentation. This is the documentation for Material app. The key points are 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Basically, we've probably all had this. We either use a home widget, or use named routes, or we have our own on-generate route function. It gets pretty confusing. This is your go-to guide. However, contrary to the last paragraph, there's no if a navigator is created, there's always a navigator being created. I have to submit a PR to get that fixed. There is one workaround if you do not want a navigator. So you can implement, there's a parameter to Material app called Builder. The Builder parameter lets you wrap Navigator with your own set of widgets. This is kind of critical. There's a couple of different ways of doing this. So let's say you probably come up with that problem where you navigate to a new route and you lose widgets. So you might have had like a provider or something like that you put inside your the home tag on Material app. And of course, when you navigate away, that entire widget tree is removed, you lose your provider. So you can actually use the builder parameter to add a provider around your navigator. What's kind of nice about the builder parameter is it's inserted between the navigator and localizations and default text style and a few other things that are done for you inside Material, so you get the best of both worlds. You can wrap like a title bar around your entire app. That's what Builder's there for. However, what's really nice is that the Builder parameter supplies you with a child. That child is always the Navigator at the moment. So that means if you don't add that child to the stack, you don't have that Navigator, you don't use the default navigation system. So you could supply your own nested children and nested navigators and some fun stuff like that. More on that later. Under the hood, but the real quick question is, what does this mean in practice? There's a few gotchas, which we'll cover on transitions in a bit, but one of them is under the hood, Material app sets a page route builder. It's not page route builder the class, and there's actually a page route builder parameter internally. And what that does, it ensures that it always creates Material page route classes for your route. So this is a good example of this when you use a named route, something like /home or whatever it might be. That will actually generate that Material page route object for you and push it onto the route stack. So there's a key gotcha then, that is it's been done for you. So you cannot override that from Material app. The only way to do so is to create your own Material app, which is not convenient at this time. There is some pros and cons to this. I don't want to speak too much on these topics. I'm covering things I'm going to cover later. So let's carry on. So I think you've all probably seen this piece of snippet. This is pretty much how everyone does unnamed routes. So you push your page route builder, your Material page route with a builder, and it builds your widget. It's really, really bad. Please don't do this. The problem is you're not really associating yourselves with the drive principle. Do not repeat yourself. Everywhere where you try and navigate to this home screen, for instance, you're going to be putting this piece of code or something similar. There's no need for it, and it doesn't really give lend itself to legibility, to readability. So you kind of want to do this: the top function, which is just one simple line. And all we've done here is there's no functional difference. We've just moved the builder, the actual the widget that the function that returns the route into a static function inside of home screen in this instance. What's really nice is then when we try to use it, it's just push home screen dot route. Another interesting point of this is if you see I'm passing a string, that is a nice parameter. So your unnamed widgets can definitely have parameters, and they're all type safe. We'll get to named versus unnamed routes in a minute. This is another one, navigator.of_context. There's two patterns. You can do navigator.push_context as well. The navigator.push is just a static function that calls the one above. Please use the one above. The top one, the of is what everyone uses for pretty much every other inherited widget in the system. Use that. Let's deprecate those navigator.push commands. Not really helpful. Also, again, just keep it consistent, right? Don't mix them across your app. That's just really bad. So a little bit about named versus unnamed routes. And we're just talking about those parameters. If you're using name routes, you've kind of only got one option. You've got two options for parameters now. That is either to serialize them and add them as query string parameters. Not so great. And the only other option is to use the arguments property of route settings. The problem with using this is it's completely untyped. You lose the type information essentially. So every time you want to read those arguments, you need to do type checking. Is the argument this type of argument that I wanted? Yes, then do it this way. If it's this, do it that way. Again, I personally prefer unnamed routes. I find they're more convenient for customization, and we'll show you some of that later. Also, navigating during build. I see this a lot with people's example codes. You're going to get into trouble. Don't do this. A good example is having a stream builder in your widget tree, and then let's say listen to login state. And then what happens is when you log in, inside your stream builder's build function, you say, oh, well, they've logged in now, so I'm going to navigator.of_context push my home screen. What you've actually managed to do there is almost create a race condition, because the platform's not expecting during build to actually have to change the entire stack, to change the entire tree. It will actually error now, I believe. Originally it didn't. It was quite awkward. So the answer is simply just to use, there's a small function from the async library called schedule microtask. Pop that in there, and it will be done after the build process has finished. And you can also do on-post frame callback. You can look that up online. I will show you some code snippets later. I want to show this, deep linking. One of the topics that comes up a lot is how do you navigate from deep linking? This is what people do, and it's wrong. This is not the way to do it. If you change the initial route that's being passed in, you'll get that at the bottom there from this example, and that is it will call on-generate route for each segment of your path, which is not what I don't think anyone expects. So you end up having to pass back a actual route object for each one of those. So you end up getting a stack of 4 entries when you push just the one initial route, which is not what anyone expects. Most of the time you want to customize, in this case, content and then the ID of the content. That's maybe one segment, one screen I want to display, and then comment followed with that ID is the second screen I want to display. So a way to do this, I'm sorry if that's a bit small on the screen, is to actually, in this case it's Firebase dynamic links, but to listen to the link, listen to the callback you're going to get for dynamic links, validate those links, verify they're exactly what you want, and then schedule a microtask with the response to push those things on the stack. It's very similar if you've ever tried to show a dialog during a init state. You don't want to do that because, again, you're trying to essentially modify the route tree during build. So again, schedule microtask or on post frame callback will sort those kind of things out. So yeah, do it right. On to our second topic, routes. Routes rely on inheritance rather than composition. I wanted to do this very nice graph, but I ran out of time. So what we're going to do is just go into the API docs, and I'm just going to give you a little exploration. You can do this yourselves. I'll bring this over, and I'll make it bigger, hopefully. Is that big enough for everyone? So this is an example here of material page route. And as you can see by the inheritance chain here, it actually inherits from a page route, which inherits from a modal route, which inherits from a transition route, which inherits from an overlay, so on and so forth. What's kind of interesting is route is all that Navigator cares about. And the route base class, you just implement 2 functions. It's install, I believe it's install and remove, which are down here somewhere, which I'm not going to find on this screen with a reflection. Well, you have to take my word for that. Now I've lost the back button. And I just wanted to just take you down this chain. So, for example, material page route is what everyone uses. You'll see it extends a page route. And this, as you can see, is Cupertino, material, or page route builder. So these are the 3 things you're probably going to want to implement at the top level, which implements all of the behavior underneath. However, it does not mean you cannot implement your own routes with any subset of behavior that you want. So it's worth exploring. The one thing to remember is that all the routes that you see below, these implementers are modal route. Modal route is quite important. We'll get to that in a bit. Modal route itself also implements local history route. So if you've ever, a good example is a form. On a form, if you get one of those pop-up fields which displays a list, that's actually using local history route segment, which add a local history entry. So when you hit the back button on Android, it will actually the pop-up will disappear rather than take you back on your routes stack. So again, worth looking up, worth looking into. And then if we go past this, we've got transitions and overlay. Now these overlay and transitions are kind of those basic ones which, well, funny enough, supply support for having an overlay inside them and having support for transitions. And I've lost the back button, but that's fine. We're going to get rid of that now. So back to the slides, hopefully. This would be helpful. Oh, look, I've got a mouse. Routes. So one of those you might have seen is page route. All of the Cupertino page route, material page route builder are all extend from page route. And these let you set this full screen dialog flag. If you've not played around with it, what it does is it can be used to indicate that your widget, your screen, is being displayed as a dialog rather than part of the main stack. There's times when you want, the best example I can think of that I used recently was terms and conditions. So from the main screen, you can get to terms and conditions and it adds it just to the main stack. But from login, which is a modal in this app, I want to display modally on top of that and not change the main stack. In which case I set the full screen dialog and it will pop up on top and show the X button in the top corner rather than a back icon. And that's actually done for you by app bar. The app bar widget, you might have seen there's a flag automatically imply leading. I will go through some code examples if I get time. I'm just trying to get through this. Automatically imply leading basically tells the app bar to display a cross, an X button at the top, or the back icon, depending on this flag, the full screen dialog flag. And then if you can take one thing away from this talk, it's that one piece of code there, modal route.of context. If you want to get your current route, like for animations, to check the name of the current route, on any widget within your tree, you can use that one line. So many people don't know this. You can also do some nice stuff, which we can experiment with later, which is if you extend route yourself or extend page route yourself, you can add your own custom fields and parameters, which basically means that using modal route.of, you can go find those custom parameters anywhere within your subtree of your route and access those fields. So a good example maybe is title or something like this, where you can supply a different title to your route and have that display inside the app bar and not have to pass that down the widget tree. So you might have covered this. Route settings are very important. Most people, when they're using unnamed routes, in fact, my example previously did not do this, forget to pass the route settings from onGenerateRoute. They're very important. For one thing, if you're using Flutter Web, that is what changes the URL. So when you're using Flutter Web, the URL in the browser location bar changes because the route name changed in the route settings. There's also a flag in route settings called isInitialRoute. IsInitialRoute literally has two main reasons. One is it indicates to the I think it's the transition route, if I remember rightly, and that is it indicates not to play the transition. So when you first open your app up, you don't want the incoming transition to play for your route. That is the flag that actually calls it into action. There's another one for that as well. And the swipe from edge behavior on Cupertino page route will not work if initial route is set to true, because obviously you're normally at the very top end, you don't want to go back. I did want to cover a little bit about how the system does navigation with the routes. Under the hood, Widgets app, which is the underlying widget for Material app, implements Widgets binding observer. It's worth looking into. If you haven't used it, you can detect when your app is being resumed from the background and a few other things like this. But one of the key points is it has two functions, did push and did pop. And what that does is it's the system's way of indicating to your app, does it want to push a new route for you, or does it want to pop a route for you? The Navigator responds to those queries, and you can actually intercept those, and you can do some fun stuff. We could play around with that later. And if you ever want to force a pop on the system, so that is to exit the app without having to pop your entire stack, which is completely possible, there's a class called System Navigator. It's System Navigator channel, and it has one function, pop, and it basically tells the system you want to leave your app and pop the entire app off the platform stack. We can go through some code examples in a minute. So here's an example of creating your own custom route. The bottom snippet, maybe I should have made it larger, never mind. And that's just inheriting page route builder. And what this is enabling us to do is actually provide a type name for our home screen route in this case. So as you can see by the top function, what we can actually do here is push and remove until and use the predicate function to say, is the route our home screen route? In this case, it will not pop the home screen route. The top line is probably, there's a bug in that. We'll ignore that. But in general, the idea here is that if you extend your own routes, then you can then use the predicates to determine if you want to do something with them specifically. Maybe check a flag in your own custom route, determine if you want to pop it or push something else on top or navigate differently. That was just a little brief sort of example that if you do that pop until, it's not animating great. If you use pop and remove until, it will remove all of the items on top until the home screen, for example. Another one, overriding back behavior. There's a little animation of this. Will pop scope is the widget you want to do. So there's several times you want to do this. In this example, if you're not on the home screen tab, the main tab of the app, when pressing back on Android, we want it to navigate back to the first tab. And after it's navigated back to the first tab, if you hit back again, it navigates out of the application. So there's just a silly bit of logic in there just to kind of lay it out simply. Interestingly enough, just word of warning, you'll notice that onWillPop is an async function that returns an inverse boolean. It's really confusing. Double check it. Okay, onto transitions. Transition gotchas. So when you're using your own routes, and let's say we did what we just did, and that is extend page route builder, you'll find that your animations don't work sometimes. And no one's quite sure why. Well, the problem is if you mix material page route and your own custom routes that extend maybe page route builder or something different, material page route has two functions, can transition to and can transition from. And basically, it says in the framework they can only transition from and to other material page routes or other Cupertino page routes. This is to stop that kind of mix of an animation, so as one leaves the screen, you're showing a different one. However, of course, it does mean that when you try to use your custom animations, for some reason, they don't play because it says it cannot transition between these two screens. So it's worth mentioning this. Either stick with material page route for everything or use your own custom page route builder. There is a workaround for this, and I'll explain that in a minute. Also, as I said before, in-screen animations, if you're using, because you have modal route.of, you have access to the animation of the current route and the secondary animation. So a little explanation, the main animation is your incoming, and the secondary animation is when it's leaving the screen. So this enables you to transition your previous screen away as a new screen comes in. You actually have access to both, and it's not just a simple reversed transition. It's actually a completely different transition you can do. I'll show you that in a minute. So I want to show this. This is some custom page transitions in effect. So first of all, they are labeled. It's a bit faint to see. But this is just, again, using modal route.of to access the animation or secondary animation and producing either a slide transition. These are literally just widgets that are in the hierarchy. You can do this at any time and do these really nice animations really easily. So what we've got there, the first one is a slide transition on that. See the yellow card at the top? It slides to the left. When you navigate away from it, that is any navigation away from it, it will slide to the left. However, what you could do is provide a piece of logic and then say, is the route that is modal route.of a different type of route extension, extended route class, then you can say, don't animate this way, animate that way. You can provide some really nice logic. And then, of course, the other two slides are the sort of top in, bottom down from the two segments of the profile screen. And then the final one, key to note here is that is actually fading. I believe that's fading in. Can't see it from here. The other overlay buttons are in the profile screen. It's worth mentioning that you need to make your screens transparent. So you'll probably wonder why your animations don't work when your scaffold background color is set to white. Set the scaffold background color to transparent, or if you're using a material widget, set its canvas color to transparent. Otherwise, you'll be wondering why you can't see your transitions leaving on the screen behind, because they're not there. They've been hidden. There is a flag called opaque on routes, And that indicates that once the route transition is finished, it should keep the widgets on the screen. The opaque flag is literally for that. So you can actually have multiple stacked different routes with all transparencies going through. Obviously, there's a cost to that, and that is it will cause build. Whenever build happens, it will rebuild all your routes on the stack there because it has to potentially repaint them or rebuild them as needed. Okay, we're going to try this. We're going to try this. Wish me luck. Whoa. So let's see. I think I'll. Let's get the screens back to mirroring. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this a bit interactive here, guys. So I'm going to talk through what I'm doing. Hopefully, it's still running. Let's check that. Let's do the obligatory color change. Yes. So this, I will make it bigger. Let's just hide that and make this bigger. I have the hotkey. I'm terrible for my hotkeys, so I've installed this lovely, apparently, I think it's presenter assistant, which tells you what hotkeys I'm pressing, because I'm always using the hotkeys, and everyone's like, what are you doing? So a simple app, demo app. We've got stateful widget for our material app here. I've just turned off the banner, given it a theme, and it has one home screen widget, which has this route, which we're not currently using, and that just has a red piece with demo text that's not aligned. Let's wrap this with safe area and get that fixed. That'll do. So what should we do first? Should we have, let's put a list in here. First of all, let's get rid of that horrible red. And let's change this to a list view. We could do a list view builder. I'm thinking like a detail, a sort of master detail kind of view, where we've got, it says, where we have a list of items here, and then we'll display those items on another screen, and we'll do some nice animations maybe between the two. So let's do a list tile. And what do we want in our list tile? We have content, is it? I forget. Title will do. Okay, that's good. Does this have on tab? I forget. Yes, it does. So we'll do our navigation there. Let's add a details screen. And we'll do our static route. Let's copy this down, make life easier. And we want this to give us a detail screen. And we'll take, let's just take the item name. And we want, if anyone has any questions, by the way, I'm willing, more than welcome to answer them while I'm beavering away here, and we have some time to kill. I think there's mics going around, I don't know. There's an organizer here that would be helpful. Hello. Do you have mics to hand around at all? Yeah. If people want to ask questions, this is going to be question time as well, I think. So feel free to put your hands up, I guess, and get a microphone. No? No one? Okay. Easier. Right, let's see. Let's do a scaffold with an app bar. That's pretty simple, straightforward so far. And then let's launch that screen from here. So Navigator. I think there's microphones.
Hi.
Hey.
I got a question. Is there any way to have to define the transitions for the named routes? I mean to not just define in the navigator stuff, but when I'm navigating, I want to define what transitions I want to use for the named routes.
You can still use modal_route.of for named routes. However, you're not going to be overriding the default transition that occurs because that's going to be occurring with material page route. There is a way of working around this problem. In fact, I'll implement it in just a minute. Once I've done this, let's just verify this works. Let's put name in here. And there we go. Okay, that's good. That's simple basic stuff. Now, if you notice that the transitions this sort of covers that problem. We're not going to use named routes, but it still applies to named routes. You can see we're getting the material page route, material page route animation transition happening here. Now, that obviously is because we're using material page route here. Let's just change this for we can change it to a named route for a second, as an example. So here's the question. Let's push named. The question is, if I need to push that parameter, I'm going to be using something like details. I think it's arguments, if I remember rightly. Yep. Name, right? Now, up here, I need to provide the lookup table where it's going to find the routes. And this returns a widget as a widget builder. I'll ignore the context being passed in. Here's the problem, right? How we're going to get to those arguments. We can get to the arguments from within the detail screen. So we would have to do something like make this stateful. This is what live coding does. Why not, since we're here? Oops. So I have name equals widget.name, so that's the one passed in. If name is null, you didn't supply one because it's optional, then we should get it from the current modal route. We need to change this. So good point to mention, like most of syntaxes, they use inherited widgets, and you can only use those after init state has finished. So did change dependencies always gets called after init state, at least once. It also gets changed on any other change, but that's fine for this instance. So we'll do modal route of context, and we'll push what I'm doing. Next settings. Please, thank you. Arguments. So arguments here in this case, I'll just show you, this is an object. So we've lost all type information there. There's no type validation during compilation. So we'll do final args. And then we're going to need to check those arguments. If args is string, great. Then if args is string, we'll set name to equal args. And that's good enough. And then down here, instead of using widget name, we'll use name from our state. So now I could supply it this way through the widget, or it will go grab it from the route settings being passed in. So if I save this, restart, there we go. There you go, still working. Yay. So let's look at these transitions. If I want to avoid this follows on to the topic mentioned. If we want to avoid the default from occurring, you need to handle the on-generate route yourself. I'll show you this while we're here, if anyone's interested. We'll take a quick look, if that will get out of the way. Material app somewhere. Yay, sorry for the scrolling, there we go. Builds this widgets.app, and if you notice it passes this, the page route builder parameter I was mentioning. This is enforcing material page route be built for any named route at the moment. Interesting enough, this is being called because of the onGenerate route function, which let's be in here. I'll find it for you. This is the default. That logic that you all saw in the documentation this is the validation, and if we're lucky, we'll find the function, which there it is. So basically, this is that logic which says, oh, do I have a, so I scroll across here. Do I have a widget on widget.home? Yes, then I'm going to provide a builder for widget.home. Or I'm going to look that one up in the routes table, and then I get my content builder, and then if I have a content builder, then use the page route builder to make that material page route, and with the settings, and push that on, use that as the return value. If, however, we don't supply routes or a home widget, then it will drop onto our custom onGenerate route and use that instead. That's exactly what we want to do. We're going to override that default behavior. This allows us to use named routes with custom routes. So let's see now. Let's use that as an example. So here, if settings.name is equal to details, then I want to show the detail screen. We always need to implement, as the per documentation you just read, you always need to implement this one, which is Navigator default route name, which is just a slash. The good reason for doing this is, for using this static rather than just slash, is you're indicating to the person that's reading your code, it's specifically the default route that you're trying to deal with. So let's do return home screen here, home screen.route. Whoops. And we'll put a title in. It's not, is it a name parameter? We'll find out. No, it's not. Demo, let's do a demo. And then we want to return the detail screen. .route. And we could, what's great about this, that logic that we saw earlier, this is obviously a different way of approaching this. Rather than doing it in the route here, we'll pull that up. I'm going to drop it in here. We could also put this in that static function. In fact, you know what? Let's put that in the static function and get this working. And so this fixes actually the bug that I said earlier that we weren't passing across the route settings. And then we also have the option here of saying something like if name is null. So we didn't pass one in, we could give it make it as an optional parameter. Go try and grab it from the arguments instead. Yep. We'll make that optional. And then let's see if we can get this hooked up in here and working. It's this little warning here. This is because we're not following all logical paths. And then obviously we could return null. Let's say we get a named path that is not the default and not a details. Then we're going to go into this function, which I'm just going to shorthand. And this could just return under a piece of material. with a, I don't know, centered text saying unfound, not found or something. Yeah. He says, oh yeah, it's a route, of course. Oops. Fast coding. Right, let's pass over the settings now. And is that all working? Let's get rid of our route now and our home screen. They're not needed since we're using on-generate route. And it's hot restarted. Hey, it still works. I know this is quite boring, but I'm just showing you different techniques here of doing the same thing. But now this also means that we can now choose not to use material page route for some of these and still use named routes because we're supplying the route object ourselves up here. So we can still use named routes down in our navigation. But when it comes to navigation, we choose what route object to build. So let's use an example quickly. And that is, let's choose to use a page route builder. Page route builder requires you to return back a page builder instead of a normal builder. This actually gives us those parameters. If you want to do some we can do this here. Let's do this here as a quick example. So what we'll do is we'll take our animation parameter, wrap this in a fade. Let's see. And say the opacity is set on the animation. Whoops. So, fingers crossed. Oh yeah, let's give it a transition duration. Something like that. So, dun dun dun, string data must not be on yet. So, what is happening? Oh yeah, because I changed this is my fault. It is, he says, yes. Widget.name. Since I'm now doing that parsing logic up top, we'll make this a stateless widget. Right, let's restart. And fingers crossed. Things are not going right at the very end. Well, let's just get back to the slides for a second. I just want to cover one quick last topic, and that is future of Navigator. We all want to see changes to this. This is not as easy as it should be. There is this new model that's coming out, and if you can do anything from this talk and you're interested in working on the proposal with the Flutter team or finding the details out, please scan this QR code. It will take you to the document. It's the proposal document that the Flutter team are using. You can comment on that document, and they will want your feedback. And this is how you get your changes from the problems that you've had for navigation back into the framework. Yeah. So please scan that, and we'll give you a few more seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then let's skip this. We've done questions. It's all right. We're running out of time. Thank you very much for coming. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can grab that QR code. And my friend Mariano is on the right. He did this talk with me last month. I just wanted to say thank you to him for helping me out on the initial stuff. Thanks.